So, welcome everyone to our, first alumni chat of this semester. It's centering on research. My name is Aditi. I will be moderating this chat, and here we have our wonderful panelists, Professor James Sumner. We have two faculty members, and we also have an alum from the university. So now I want to give it up to you guys for a moment to introduce yourselves with your name and for the alumni, the year of graduation, the faculty we did research with, and the POL project. And for the faculty, I want to ask, again, your name, the department, and I suppose the sort of the specialization and all that, and how and anything about your current research that you would like to share. So I'll hand it off. Anyone can start us off. Why don't we start with Professor Sumner, then Professor Woldense, and then yeah.
I'm Jane Sumner. I'm in the political science department. I'm an assistant professor. I've been here since 2016. I have my PhD from Emory University, and I study political economy and quantitative methods. So I do a lot of research on the role that companies play in politics, and I also do a lot of research on how we measure concepts and collect data. So I'm working on several projects at the moment. I'm working on one longer term project about, which is several papers about corporate philanthropy and the quality of public services in American cities. And I'm working on another big long-term project about the political psychology of small business owners.
Thank you. Professor Woldense.
My name is Josef Woldense, and I'm in the Afro department, African American African Studies, and affiliate in political science. And got my PhD in political science at Indiana University. And my research primarily focused on authoritarian regimes, the internal dynamics, what happens within those regimes, how do elites and leaders interact with each other. And I do this by way of sort of various approaches, looking at appointments over time, and then from there try to reconstruct what those interactions look like. In other words, where is it that rulers place people, who do they promote, who they demote, who is it that they're circulating around in an effort to stay in power. I'll leave it at that.
So I provide no diversity to the panel in terms of occupation because I'm an assistant professor of political science at the University of Minnesota Duluth. So I graduated from the Twin Cities campus in 2012, and I got my PhD in political science at Texas A&M in 2018. And my research is mostly concentrated in political behavior. Kind of broadly speaking, I do work on misinformation, conspiracy theory beliefs, and most recently I've started a project looking at public opinion towards universal basic income.
Interesting. So, yeah. Thank you so much for the detailed introductions. I want to start us off with a question that can apply to all panelists. As students, I suppose whenever you were students, what research opportunity did you find the most helpful for your undergrad career?
I guess I'll start in the same order we went before.
Sorry? Oh yeah.
Do you want us to go in the same order?
Yeah.
I stumbled into doing research as an undergraduate really accidentally. I needed money and they were paying, and it was a good third job that paid better and in cash than working at Starbucks. And I could do it at night. So I did that. So I had three different research sort of experiences, I guess, when I was an undergrad. The first was that one where she was paying me something like $10 an hour in cash. And I was making like $6.15 an hour working at Starbucks. So it was a pretty sweet deal. And I was working for a graduate student who had me doing some work in Stata. I am a failed engineering student. And so I got hooked up to that opportunity because this graduate student was actually the undergrad advisor in the department. And when I dropped out of engineering school, I was meeting with someone to figure out if I could be a poli-sci major. And she said, "Oh, you've taken computer science classes." And I said, "Yes, I have taken computer science classes." And she said, "Great. Do you think you can run some computer code for me?" And I said, "Yes, I can. How much do you pay?" And so I was not particularly interested in the research she was actually doing, nor did I really understand what I was doing. But that was a really good introduction to the fact that I could use my paltry computer science skills in political science. And then I had another position I ended up taking because the college, so I went to the University of Michigan for undergrad, and the college screwed up my audit for graduation. And it turns out they emailed me the semester before I was supposed to graduate and said, "Actually, you're 2 credits short." And then I got an email like a day later in the midst of my panic that said, "Hey, we're looking for research assistants for credit. Just send a resume and let us know how many credits you want." And so I sent them a resume and said, "I would like 2 credits, please." And I ended up working for Hans Knoll, who's an Americanist, who's at Georgetown. He was like a visiting fellow or something at Michigan at the time. And he gave me a book on R and said, "Read this and come back when you're done." And I did. And I got 2 credits and I graduated, and it was lovely. And then I had another project I started that came out of a class project where I talked to the professor who was teaching the class. And I really liked the paper I was working on, which was about corporate governance laws in US states. And I said, "I would really like to continue working on this project. I think it's really interesting." And he said, "It's really not interesting, but would you like to work on something else instead?" And I said, yes. And that paper was published in the British Journal of Political Science in 2014. So that's my story. All just things I stumbled into strictly by accident and out of necessity.
Yeah, I don't have a fun story like that.
Yeah, follow that, Joseph. Go.
I can't follow that. I actually really never worked with a faculty. I went to a small liberal arts college, undergrad, Bard College. And just a small setting itself, you pretty much had to write research papers in almost all your classes, which is normal. So while I didn't work sort of under the tutelage of a faculty member, I was always working closely with a faculty mentor, helped me through the process. And yeah, I thought the process itself, the kinds of things that I was able to investigate, inquire about in sort of a systematic way that you rarely have the opportunity to do with, as news come to you or whatever it may be, right? It just comes, you have to process it, you might have some emotions about it, and then within days it's gone. And it's rare that you have the opportunity to sort of really dig deep and carefully think about whatever the subject matter is. And so that to me was really an attractive part of doing research.
Well, the fun part for you guys will get to be hearing about some of your colleagues now that I got to do research for. So I also kind of, I don't know if it was an accident that I got into doing research, but it was like through some career questioning. So when I started college, I wanted to be a high school teacher. And so I was like really gung-ho about this. But then I started being interested in research, and the first person I ever did research for was Ron Krebs. And I was not really interested in particular in that sort of thing. But I worked for Ron for a little while. I can't remember. I read a lot of speeches. I don't remember what exactly it was I was counting. It was something really tedious. And then after that, I was friends with Tim Johnson's grad student, Amanda Bryan. And so Tim and Amanda got me reading the papers of Harry Blackman, looking for particular annotations in his pre-oral argument notes. And I think somewhere there's still a flash drive with like thousands of photos on it of this colored pencil written notations that I had to dig through.
You know, probably don't know what a flash drive is. I just realized when you said that.
I literally purchased a flash drive yesterday and thought the same thing. I'm like, this is like old tech. I got really distressed about it for like 5 minutes, but yeah, I remember Amanda gave me this thumb drive that had all these pictures on it, and she said, come back when you've looked at all of them. So I did that for a while. And then after doing all this research stuff, I kind of was like, I sort of like research, but I like teaching. And I think I was sitting in Tim's office when I was like, okay, I like teaching and I like research. What's a job where you can do that? He's like, well, I think you want to be a professor. And I'm like, okay, how do I do that? And he's like, well, you need to get a PhD. I said, okay. So I think it all worked out pretty well since I'm now I'm a professor. But and then I did a UROP, and I did my UROP with John Sullivan. Actually, it was probably one of the last. John retired not long after that, so probably didn't do too many UROPs with people after that. But and then it was fun when I was in grad school and I realized what a big deal he was, because I had no idea that he was kind of a big deal. And then I was like, oh, this guy's a big deal. Well, that was cool. So he was like my honors thesis supervisor, and he was awesome and really supportive. Everybody was awesome and really supportive. So yeah, and now I'm in the club, sort of, I guess. So I don't know if that means what that tells you about me, but I wasn't adequately deterred. So here I am.
Wonderful. Well, is it like a thought? Is it thumb drive like a? Okay, I'm messing around with it. But quick question: what was your? I mean, you might have mentioned it before, but what was the UROP on that you did?
Oh, yikes. I'm sure it was terrible. I should probably go find it and read it and be like, gosh, this is really crap. I think it was about deception, political deception. I remember I got into being an experimentalist like right out the gate, right? And so I did a survey experiment, and I remember I was like trying to get other undergrads to take my survey for like pieces of candy. I was like a hustler. I learned how to be like an academic hustler doing my UROP, because I was like, how do I get people to take this survey? This was before MTurk, so like you had to like use candy instead of 50 cents. So I definitely learned how to like hustle to get people to do surveys.
See, there's a methods paper in there, like what kind of candy best incentivizes participation.
Yeah, it was like, I remember I went to the store and bought a huge bag of old Halloween candy. I was so like, I'm like, now that I'm thinking about this, I'm like, gosh, I was such a cute, overexcited undergrad, like just, and I carried this bag of candy around getting people to take my survey. And it was like, that's how I did my UROP project. I would not recommend this strategy. Like, don't do this. It's really not going to produce good results. But like, I think I learned how to work hard. Everything seemed easy after that.
Wow. Yeah, I asked because I had the incredible opportunity to do UROP last year on. I mean, I didn't get to do it in poli-sci. I did it in history, and it was about the history of race and drugs in the United States from 1880 to 1930. So I just found that interesting because I wanted to hear different experiences with the UROP, because I know it's such a it's an independent research thing, so it's very, it really does differ based on the project. So I found that interesting.
When I was in college, we had Europe, just as an aside, and my GPA was too low to qualify.
Oh, no.
The funny thing now is I supervise URAPs. Like, I really felt like it was a really fun day here at UMD. The first day I ever, like, some kid asked me to be their URAP advisor. And it's like a life cycle had completed. I was like, oh my gosh, like,
Did you give them one of the remaining candies?
No, I did. I actually, you know, I was too nice. I gave them $100 of my own money so that they could do an actual MTurk thing, because I did not want them to go buy old Halloween candy and peddle it to other students. I was like, let's get some real data so that you can do an actual thing. Yeah. Maybe I should have not done, maybe they needed to like earn it more. I don't know.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. And I wanted to ask quickly, because this could actually apply to anyone on the panel, but what advice would you give to students who are trying to reach out to a professor about a research opportunity, either a Europe or a DERB, besides, you know, don't use Halloween candy? What other advice would you provide for them?
I can start.
Yeah.
So I get a lot of emails from students I've never met before who are like, hi, can you supervise my project? And that's always a bit odd because I've never met them. I've never taught them. And I did once say yes to that, and it went very, very badly and involved me like sending a million emails, and it was very stressful for me. So, you know, try to meet the person first. Don't just send cold emails until someone says yes. Especially, I think that I'm someone who, like, I want to say yes, I want to help, but I'm also not going to say yes if I don't feel like you have a credible project, or if I don't have enough time to actually like supervise appropriately. So I've recently had to say no to a lot of students just because I'm really at my cap of what I can do without shortchanging anyone. So I guess the first piece of advice is just initially at least reach out to people you've taken classes with. The second piece is just, if someone says no, don't take it personally. It might be more about them than about you.
That makes sense. Yeah, because you know, I think reaching out is also like a really daunting thing for a lot of students. That's really helpful to hear. Professor Woldense, do you have any thoughts on this, like in terms of advice for students and reaching out?
You know, look at the faculties. If you're trying to do research with the faculty, definitely check out their research. Even if you don't understand all the stuff that you're reading, try to familiarize yourself with it. Try to get a sense of what's the sort of thematic linkage here among the various projects. And then ask yourself how you may fit in that. Obviously, if you've taken a class with the faculty who teaches something that they actually research, it's a bit easier, but still, nonetheless, let's say check out their profile and then try to situate yourself within that. And the other thing I'd say, you know, Jane was just talking about students, but I think on the other end, so I would consider Jane to be, for instance, much more adept at delegating work to undergrads to integrate them into her work. And I'm really just starting doing that. And so I'm very much a novice. And in that respect, for students to realize that, you know, some faculty are more ahead in creating more fruitful collaborations in that way. Whereas others like myself, I'm still learning, I'm still finding out what can be delegated, what cannot be delegated, just because, you know, at times it's a bit difficult, as Catherine was just describing. she was doing tedious work, annotating, and not quite understanding how it fit into the larger picture. And the fact that she even was able to annotate, while it seems tedious and boring, may speak to, Ron Krebs' ability to understand what an undergrad can do who doesn't come equipped with the necessary skills to perform X, Y, Z that the faculty might need. So maybe even like having a conversation with the faculty to better understand what skills am I bringing to the table and what is it that I can possibly do in this bigger, larger project.
Yeah, so it seems in both instances, it's a lot of times it's just better to reach out in person rather than a purely virtual or email based interactions, just to get a better sense, right?
But don't just come knock on someone's door in the middle of the day.
No, of course.
Nobody likes that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so UMD, we don't have a grad program, so it's a little bit different here in terms of like having resources to like pay an undergrad to do work. So I don't have so much of that. More of what I deal with is like kids that are interested in like doing their own projects, not so much doing grunt work for me, though I would like them to do some of that sometimes. And yeah, most of the time when students are asking me to help them with their research is because they've taken a class of mine. So that usually helps. And I think Jane's got it right. Like, it's hard to say yes to people you don't know, because you don't know kind of what you're getting into, and it's definitely going to take up your time, especially in the, the pre-tenure lifestyle. You have to be careful about what you spend your time on. And so that can be another like thing that's not about you as the student, but is more about the faculty member and what they have time to do, because I've gotten to the point now where I've had to be more discerning about what I work on with students, because I get too many requests to work on stuff, and I have to kind of be like, how viable do I think the project is? Like, is this student going to work really hard or not? Like, what are we kind of working towards here? Because I'm always open to the idea of like doing co-authorships and stuff with students. But I know it's going to be work on my part. And I don't think I realized as an undergrad, like, that it was work for a faculty member to like teach my uneducated self like what to do about these things. And now that I'm on this side of the desk, I'm like, oh, it's work to deal with people like you, like 10 years ago. You're like a very big time suck, actually. Hopefully I was like worth it and everything, but like, and it's like very rewarding in many ways, but it does take up faculty members' time. So you have to be sort of cognizant of that part as well.
Yeah, I've started co-authoring with undergrads in the last couple of years. I think that the first of those papers that's I published with an undergrad 2 years ago, and I have another one that just went under review. But yeah, I carefully vet them until they get to that point. I have like a whole process now for how I sort of assess what students can do. But because I teach research design, I do end up just supervising a lot of random projects. And one tip I think for the students watching is that something that I find consistently is that undergrads propose things that are books, possibly 2 or 3 books, things that are just extremely ambitious. And I find that I just am constantly saying, like, take 1% of this and just do it well, but you don't need to drink the ocean. So I guess that's, if you want to propose a project, don't drink the ocean. The other thing is I'm on the Europe selection committee for CLA, which is, calling it a committee is actually kind of a joke. There are only 2 of us. I guess technically we're a committee. And when students apply for Europe, there are a few consistent things that we see that are problems. And one of them is like appropriate level of ambition. So sometimes we find students propose something and then we say, And then what do you do for the next 13 weeks? And so that's something that I think usually counts against students. Another thing in the year out process is when we receive applications where it's not clear what the student's component is. Like, it's like, oh, you're just coding for someone. That's not a year up, the way we define year up exactly. There has to be some individual intellectual contribution. So those are sort of the big things that we tend to knock students for. The third is incredible ethical violations. So, think about that. That's just another thing. You're not allowed to hurt people. Broadly construed, you're not allowed to hurt people.
Just curious, has that been an issue with previous proposed projects at all from students?
Oh, for Europe? Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Not like we're going to torture people, but like you can't ask people extremely invasive, uncomfortable questions for like no particular reason. You can't like, there have been a few where it's like anyone who takes that survey will be psychologically damaged by it.
No.
Yeah, there have been, I don't want to give too many details, lest somebody like is behind one of these, but like, I would say every year. So I don't read them in the summer, but I read them in the spring and in the fall. And every year, probably there's like one where it's like, no, you can't do that. You can't hurt people.
I will say right now, I'm having a kid do an IRB application for one, and I'm just like, because I had to do one for my own UROP, and he's like, this is really, really annoying. And I'm like, yes, this is like an excellent learning opportunity for you, right? Like, and he's like, why did we have to do this all? And I'm like, this is why, because people would do this. And then I had to read about Stanford prison experiment. So yeah, there's lots of like character building elements to research. And I think the IRB provides at least half of them. So yes, if you have to do an IRB, it's like a worthwhile study in patience and resilience. Go for it. Also, you won't hurt anybody.
Or get the university sued.
Yeah, there will be less lawsuits and more fun.
It's always a great promise. Yeah, so then, I mean, that kind of leads in very well to the next question. Maybe already answers it to some extent. So to just, I guess, recap from this discussion, what characteristics specifically would you look for in students who want to research with you, like specifically? I guess. And we can start and go in the same order as well as the other question.
Okay. A big one is the ability to, like, a demonstrated ability to complete things and follow through. Probably honestly more than anything else. I can teach the skills that I need students to have. I cannot teach you to not ghost me and make me send emails for weeks trying to figure out if you're alive. So the ability to work independently, to complete things, to follow directions, to ask questions when they come up instead of just sort of spiraling for weeks, not disappearing. I think most of it is really the demonstrated ability to complete things more than anything else. I mean, if students come in with some kind of language skill or some kind of coding skill, I am happy to take advantage of it. But the big thing is just the ability to make me sure that you will do the work and not create a lot of work for me as I try to figure out where you disappeared to.
Agreed. That's all I've got.
Yeah, pretty much that. Now I have a lot, like I'll have students come to me and say, I want to do a URAP. And I'm like, okay, well, what do you want to do it on? I don't know. Oh, okay, well, and then we kind of talk about it. And then I'm like, okay, we'll go marinate on that for a while. And then they don't come back. So I don't know if they like failed to marinate or, lost interest because I alarmed them, or, what happened, but yeah, feeling like, that the person is interested and that they're going to follow through is kind of the biggest thing.
Of course, yeah, and so it seems to be that I guess follow through and is one of the main sort of characteristics then, and there's no good lead into this next question, so I'll just ask. In terms of faculty involvement, in what ways do your projects specifically, in what ways do they differ? Do you approach different Europe projects with a different level of faculty involvement, or is it always seems to be consistently the same?
I mean, I try and let the student lead, right? I try not, like, I mean, when I did my Europe, John mostly left me to my own devices,
Yeah.
which might have been questionable. I don't know. I'd have to read the paper again, see how terrible it was, but it's probably really bad because I was like 20. So now when I do them, I try and let the student lead the idea process, because like in my mind, taking it over isn't really the point.
Yeah.
Like they should be sort of doing their own thinking and coming up with their own idea, which I find seems to alarm and make them nervous a lot, because we'll talk about ideas and I'll be like, well, I'll go marinate on it. Because they seem to think sometimes we'll have a meeting and we're just gonna figure it out right now. That's like, well, you don't figure it out right now. So you're gonna have to go like, have a cocktail and like watch television and like think about it and kind of, whatever. And then they get sort of discouraged, but I think sort of encouraging that process is important. So not taking it over is sort of my plan.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yes, I agree with that. When it comes to your ops, I try to be very hands-off and let the students do what they want to do. So I mean, at this point, I probably do more directed studies than I do Europs at this point, just because the Europe deadlines are at weird times. And so I end up with students who are like, I would really like to do a research project. It's December. I would like to do it next semester. I would have had to apply to Europe in October. And so then I end up doing directed studies with students, and I treat them very much the same, and they're kind of the same in my mind, except that the student doesn't get paid. I guess that's the big difference. But I sort of have like a set schedule now at this point for where students should be at each point in the semester that helps to sort of provide a framework. But I mostly try to just provide mentorship and get out of the way.
One thing I would add is in terms of projects like that are more intimate, where you have a more close relationship with the faculty, just lends itself for more serendipitous conversations about research, whether it be about the substance itself, whether it be about the method, whether it be about research in general. So there's just more opportunities for a conversation to get rich and more in depth. And with previous students that I've worked with, what I try to do is have them actually fill out a form, just give me like a list of things that they would like, even if they can't fully articulate it, but what are the kinds of things that you would like to get out of this experience? And then what we do, if it's something that's doesn't quite fit in with the project that you're working on, we'll make time outside of that and talk about that. And so in that sense, I think those are the kinds of opportunities that I think will be more difficult in a class setting.
And
I really like that idea about having them fill out that form. I might steal that actually, because I think a lot of students, at least, I don't know if they're more familiar with kind of how the like science and engineering college does UROPs, because a lot of those are definitely more like working in a lab on like somebody else's project, but we don't have to have them be like that because things are different. And so I feel like a lot of times students approach me with like, I'm going to tell them what to do for their UROP. like, oh, so you have an idea, right? Like, I'm kind of interested in this. What's your idea? And I'm like, like, you have to have an idea. Like, and then they and then that's when I feel like they start getting kind of like, whoa, I don't know if I can have an idea yet. And it's like, yes, you can. Like, and so I like that form idea. Might steal that.
I stole that idea from Joseph a few years ago, but there is actually no form that I use. I just ask. But yeah, Joseph told me like 3 years ago that he does that. And I was like, that's brilliant. And now I do that. I think of myself when it comes to supervising students, whether it's grad students or undergrads, as like I'm a research therapist. So like I am like here to like listen to you and help you make sense of all of the whirling thoughts in your head, but they're not about like your parents. It's about like research questions. That's sort of my role here.
And it's necessary, right? Because like you said, they come in and they have some like huge idea. And I'm like, you can't do that. And they're like, why not? I'm like, because that's literally like a career's worth of work and then maybe a little bit more, right? So you can't do that. So a lot of times you're trying to like walk it smaller, and that can be difficult.
Yeah, and so I'm seeing that we're about more than halfway through this session. So I wanted to take a moment to hand it off to our student here. Do you have any questions?
Sure. So first of all, I actually love Dr. Krebs's research. I don't know what's wrong with you, but I am fascinated by it. So I'm interested in doing research to help for a research-intensive career going to grad school. We've talked a lot about UROPs. Which research opportunities are, and taking what out of a research opportunity is best for preparing for grad school? Is it something that's individual like a UROP? Is it working on a, forming a close relationship with faculty members? Or is it something else completely?
I have an answer for this. Sorry. You want to start? You can
Oh,
start.
God.
Okay. So I have two answers, and they're related. So the first thing is forming a close relationship with faculty members is super important if you want to go to grad school, because they will write you letters of recommendation. And that is hugely important. But related to that, if you want to go to grad school, one of the things you need to do is convince the committees that you understand what you're getting into, that you're not just like, I don't know, I've been in school for a long time. I might as well just go to school for another 5 to 8 years. This is a paradigm I understand. I'll continue to be in school. We definitely had students like that when I was in grad school, where it's like, you just wanted to remain in coursework forever. Is that like a comfortable space for you? So forming that relationship will also, and doing a research project will give you a better idea of what professors actually do and what research actually looks like. Because it's not this neat linear process like you're taught in class. It's circular and nonlinear and messy, and there's a lot of existential crisis involved at various points. And maybe that's just mine. But we don't talk about like the 3 stages of the research process that are like crippling self-doubt and nightmares. The point where you're like, no, this is all wrong, but like, I'm in it now. I'm going to keep going. So anyway, but having a better sense of like what you actually are getting into so that you can make a credible case that like, I want to go to grad school. Here's why I want to go to grad school. Here's what I want to do. Here is how I see this playing out. Like, you'll probably be wrong about how those things work out and what you're going to do, but knowing what you're getting into so you can make a credible case that like, I am making an informed decision here. Like, I know what I'm getting into. I know what I want to do is very, very important.
So the single most important thing that I did in preparation for grad school was I took the methods classes with the first year PhD students my last year of college. So I took Paul's class and Chris's class. Do they still teach those classes? Like, okay, well, some things never change, but yep. I took both of those with the first year PhD students. So Perhaps more proof that my sanity is lacking, I continued to go to graduate school after spending lots of time in the grad lab with graduate students, and taking class with them. So I think but I think one of the benefits of that was that I did know what I was getting into, and I had very credible claims, like I have done research, I had some teaching experience, I had taken grad school classes, and I still wanted to go like a nutter. So yeah, I think being able to articulate that is super important. And you have to have good relationships with faculty, so they will write you nice letters. In terms of like which research opportunity is better, I think generally you kind of have to start with working for somebody else, before you can work for yourself. Because otherwise I wouldn't have known like what to do necessarily. It was good to work for Ron and for Tim before kind of doing my own thing, because it sort of gives you a sense of what's going on. And preferably if you do that with a faculty member whose research interests align with your own, that's better. I thought I was going to be a judicial politics person, then I wasn't. Sometimes I still dabble, but like, yeah, and your interests might change, and that's fine. Like, I'm sure nobody here necessarily did exactly what they thought they were going to do when they went to grad school, or maybe you did. But I think things change, and you have to just be open to that. Too much rigidity is not always the best.
Yeah, I mean, to kind of piggybacking on what you just said here is to think about applying to grad school. If you think about those on the other side, those who are on the committee, right? What they're trying to do is they're trying to make a judgment about admitting someone who will have to, yeah, there's coursework in the beginning, but ultimately it's about producing an independent researcher, right? So you're going to be essentially working in the gray area with virtually no structure. And what the committee is tasked with is make a judgment on whether the person in the application has the wherewithal, some background skills to then succeed in that kind of environment. And so when you're asking about graduate school, really it's the application itself is about, can I send a credible signal that I would be someone who can work in this structureless environment and succeed and thrive? And so, some of the things that you just heard here, be it a strong letter from a faculty member, be it, in this case, the skill part, the certain kinds of methods, classes that you have taken. We can go deeper. I mean, you can, I would encourage you, if you want to go to grad school, definitely speak to faculty. And there's certainly ways for you to position yourself more effectively. Perhaps there might even be sort of a gap year that you want to do something in between, work at some affiliation with a research project of a faculty, maybe even at another university. But ultimately, really between now and then being when you send your application out, what you want to do is ask yourself, what would it take for me to send a credible signal to the committee that I am ready and will thrive in that kind of environment?
I cannot top Jane's working at Jimmy John's in their gap year. I also took so I finished my undergrad in 3 years. And then I panicked. I think we'll use the word panic. And because I had applied at the end of my 3rd year to go to grad school the next year. And then I kind of freaked out and was like, I don't know if I can do this right now. Texas A&M was very nice. They gave me a deferral for a year. So I took a gap year, and in my gap year, I coached high school debate and tutored the student athletes at the Twin Cities campus. So I don't know if that's the best strategy. I kind of had this backup of what, they've given me a deferral. So I was kind of like, I can kind of live it. This was my definition of living it up, I guess. I don't know. But those were great experiences, you know, and I'd been coaching debate all through college, so I just kept doing it. Gave me good tutoring offensive linemen in sign language is a very good teaching education. You learn a lot about how to work with different types of people. But yeah, I don't think it's a big deal if you do that. I think lots of people take a gap year, and that's okay. And if it makes you feel more prepared, like I was ready to go when I was done. And so I think that was more valuable. And then when I got there, I think I was more successful because I felt really ready. But I have a lot of students, kind of like Jane said, you know, they think that grad school is just taking more classes or whatever, but it's really not. So you have to sort of show something beyond that.
It can be useful to have like a full-time job. I had 2 jobs between undergrad and grad school. I worked at a law firm and I worked at Jimmy John's, neither of which were in my interest area. I just needed to pay rent, and they paid me. And there weren't a lot of jobs because I graduated in the recession. But I think that a lot of students do go to grad school thinking, oh, you know, it's just an extension of college. And I think that it helps a lot to start with the mentality that it's your job, because it is your job.
Thank you. And yeah, this is that was a really great question. It sparked an incredible conversation. So we're so bringing it back to like to sort of piggyback off of like the grad school angle. So in what ways can sort of research opportunities like the Europe or other opportunities, in what ways can that have you seen like have you seen students demonstrate skills that would be useful for grad school or post grad education or anything of that sort?
I mean, I guess there's a couple of ways of looking at this. One, your project itself, again, I'm just talking about strictly the application process when you apply to grad school.
Yeah.
You having done a project like that can send a credible signal about your involvement in research.
Yeah.
So that's one. The other is the ability to get a sense of, even as Kathy was saying, the tedium involved in research. Right? The stuff that you see at the end is the shiny product. The stuff you don't see is the tedious stuff that goes into it that enables you to create the shiny thing at the end. And having exposure to that and really asking yourself, is this something I could see myself doing in a project I'm interested in? And then lastly, also, I would encourage you, if you're part of a Euro project, if you are doing tedious things, really push the faculty you're working with in understanding how that tedious piece of information that you're tediously working through fits in the larger project, but also what methodology are they using to integrate it, analyze it, and then eventually make it part of the shiny thing. And what that can do for you is give you exposure on how does this discipline produce knowledge? What is actually knowledge? What goes into that? And that can help you understand, okay, these are the kinds of skills that I need to learn if I want to partake and be part of this knowledge production discipline called political science, for instance. So.
And I just want to say for a moment here, Professor Sumner, when you spoke about the Crippin self-doubt aspect of the research stage, I have to say that was a little too real for me, because I remember when I was submitting my first draft for the Europe a year ago, I remember this didn't go out as in the the state of the drafts, but I had a line in there that essentially said, quote, "Is any of this usable?" So it was, and that was the most amount of self-doubt. It was like at the finishing stages of the project, when I already got feedback that said, okay, this is a lot of like basically what works, what doesn't work, and everything. But then it got to that point again. So that was a very That was a very relatable thing, that the self-doubt part of this.
Yeah. If 3085 was 16 weeks long, we'd have a whole week on crippling self-doubt and self-care. The thing that you say, is any of this usable? One thing I think undergrads often struggle with, that I notice when I work with them now that I'm working to publish some things with undergrads, is that students, you get a sense when you write seminar papers for a class that you write for 15 weeks and then it's done.
Yeah.
Or you write for 48 hours, in a monster, whatever, a monster fueled, delirium, whatever your style is. The reality is that usually that produces the first draft, and the answer is no, none of it's usable. And that's not a reflection on you. It's a reflection on the fact that things go through a million drafts. So I have a book coming out in June. I believe that, because I was going through the page proofs a few weeks ago, I believe that there are like 2 paragraphs and 3 footnotes in the book that were in the first draft. And it's like 200 something pages long, right? So like less than a whole page of material remained from the first draft. And that's something that students don't see, because you produce one draft, you turn it in. Maybe if you're really organized, you produce a draft and then you edit it and then you turn it in. But like your first draft is really just a first draft, which so Joseph and I submitted a paper in December, January, and like the entire project changed after the first draft. Like it went a completely different direction than the first draft. So yeah, I mean, the answer, I understand the crippling anxiety part, but the reality is, of a complete draft, a lot of it might not actually be usable.
And that, that ended up being, I mean, not fully the case, but at least partly the case. A lot of it had to change after I sent it out. So no, that makes a lot of sense. We are now 5 minutes till the end. If you have any other questions, no. Or any other closing comments about research in general, or any specific sort of last piece that you'd like to share about your experience with research, or any of the current research you're working on right now. I know Professor Sumner, you were talking about a book that you're releasing in June. Anything that you'd like to let students know about in that vein?
No.
Yeah. All right. Of course. And so then I guess my next question, to just close off, would be, are you open to students contacting you with further questions after this? I can for any other questions about research.
I am.
Yeah.
Sure.
Sorry, kind of cut out for on our end.
Oh, I said yes.
Thank you. And Professor Woldense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us today about this. It's been a very enlightening conversation about the process of research, and like the advice that you would give students about how to pursue research opportunities. In fact, a lot of the guiding questions actually were answered through these questions. And I mean, like all of the other ones that I haven't asked yet actually were we also got to those too. So that was really great to see that it did spark that discussion. So I want to just take a moment to again thank you all for coming today, and
thank you to our fantastic audience. You did great.
Yeah, so yeah, thank you so much for coming. And so this will be going up on the department YouTube channel as well. If anybody wants to see, please let anyone know as well. So thank you so much. I think I can stop recording now, but again, yes, I know I sound like a broken record right now, but seriously, we really appreciate the time.